The morning sun crept over the horizon, casting golden light on the quiet streets of Willow Creek. In a modest home on the edge of town, Leonard King sat at the small, scarred kitchen table. The room was filled with the soft aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Around him hung framed photographs that told stories of a joyful past, a beaming young couple on their wedding day, a day at the lake, Christmases filled with laughter. Leonard stared at one of the pictures for a long time, his calloused fingers lightly tracing the frame. It was a wedding portrait of him and his wife, Grace. He sighed deeply, the lines on his face deepening as he gripped the mug of coffee in his hand. "Good morning, my love," Leonard said softly as he entered the small bedroom where Grace sat, gazing out the window. Alzheimer's had taken much from her, but her warm smile remained. He knelt beside her, gently stroking her hand. "Today's a new day, sweetheart." Grace didn't reply, her distant eyes focused on something far beyond the room. But the faint flicker of a smile on her lips was enough for Leonard. After helping Grace to the kitchen and ensuring she took her medication, Leonard prepared to leave for work. He kissed her forehead, whispering, "I'll be back soon. Be well." Outside, his old sedan groaned as it started. Leonard drove toward the supermarket where he worked, his heart heavy. Bills loomed over him like an ever-present storm cloud. The job at the store didn't pay much, but it was enough to scrape by, to keep Grace's medications stocked and the lights on. The parking lot was already bustling when Leonard arrived. He grabbed his faded vest from the back seat and stepped into the warm morning air. A new row of shopping carts had scattered across the lot overnight, and he set to work collecting them, ignoring the twinge of pain in his knee. As he moved the carts into neat rows, a sharp voice rang out from behind him. "Leonard! Why are these carts still everywhere?" It was Mark, his manager, a man younger than Leonard by decades but with none of his patience. Leonard straightened, his back protesting. "I'll have it sorted soon, sir." "Soon isn't good enough," Mark snapped. "If you can't keep up, maybe it's time we found someone who can." Leonard swallowed his frustration and returned to work, his movements slow but steady. He paused briefly to catch his breath, his gaze lifting toward the sky. Quietly, he whispered, "Just give me the strength for one more day." Keanu's arrival. Unbeknownst to Leonard, a motorcycle had rumbled into the parking lot moments earlier, the low growl of its engine breaking the morning calm. The rider, clad in a simple black jacket and helmet, turned off the ignition and surveyed the scene. It was Keanu Reeves, fresh off a late-night flight and an early breakfast at a nearby diner. Keanu removed his helmet and ran a hand through his hair, his sharp eyes catching sight of Leonard struggling with the carts. He watched as the older man pushed forward despite the obvious pain in his knee. He also noticed Mark standing by the door, chatting casually with a coworker, indifferent to Leonard's efforts. Keanu hesitated for a moment, then stepped off his bike. Adjusting his sunglasses, he walked toward Leonard with purpose. "Need a hand?" he asked, his calm voice cutting through the noise of the parking lot. Startled, Leonard looked up. "Oh, no, thank you. I've got it under control," he replied with a tired but polite smile. Keanu stepped closer, his tone firm yet kind. "I insist." For a moment, Leonard hesitated, then sighed and gestured toward a scattered row of carts. "If you're serious, you can start with those." Keanu nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. Together, the two men worked in companionable silence, gathering the carts into neat rows. It wasn't long before Keanu broke the quiet. "How long have you been doing this?" "About 3 years," Leonard said, his voice tinged with weariness. "My wife got sick, and I needed a steady job to cover the bills. It's not easy, but you do what you have to." Keanu listened intently, his usual air of cool detachment replaced with genuine curiosity. Leonard spoke openly, sharing snippets of his life, his love for Grace, and the relentless challenges they faced together. As they finished arranging the last of the carts, Keanu straightened and wiped his hands on his jeans. "Let's take a break," he suggested. My treat. Leonard hesitated, his pride urging him to decline, but the ache in his knee convinced him otherwise. All right, he said with a nod. The two men made their way to a small cafe inside the supermarket. Over cups of steaming coffee, Leonard spoke about his life and his dreams for Grace. Keanu, ever the quiet listener, asked thoughtful questions that encouraged Leonard to share more. You're a strong man, Keanu said finally, his voice filled with admiration. Stronger than most people I know. Leonard smiled faintly. I don't know if it's strength or just stubbornness. Either way, I keep going, for her. Keanu didn't reply right away, but his eyes betrayed the depth of his thoughts. It was clear to him that Leonard was a man who deserved more, a break, a chance to breathe, even if only for a little while. As the day unfolded, Leonard and Keanu returned to the parking lot, where Leonard resumed his work with a faint sense of renewed energy. Keanu, however, lingered, watching the older man move with a determination that belied his exhaustion. Something about Leonard's story had struck a chord deep within him. Keanu approached Leonard one last time as he was finishing up his shift. Leonard, before I go, I want to say, what you're doing for Grace, it's inspiring. But don't forget to take care of yourself, too. Leonard paused, leaning on the handle of a cart for support. I appreciate that, but I've already made my choice. Grace comes first. Always. Keanu nodded, respect evident in his gaze. I understand, he said, shaking Leonard's hand firmly. But sometimes, help comes from unexpected places. With those parting words, Keanu walked to his motorcycle, his helmet tucked under his arm. As he climbed on, he cast one last glance toward Leonard, who was heading toward his car. Keanu felt a pang of determination. He couldn't just leave things as they were. The plan takes shape. That evening, Keanu sat in the quiet of his hotel room, his thoughts consumed by Leonard's story. He knew he couldn't solve all of Leonard's problems, but he could at least ease some of the burden. With that in mind, he pulled out his phone and began making calls. The next morning, Keanu arrived early at the supermarket, bypassing the bustling parking lot and heading straight for the manager's office. Mark, the store manager, was startled to see the Hollywood star standing in his doorway. Mr. Reeves? Mark stammered, quickly standing. What brings you here? Keanu offered a polite smile. I'd like to discuss Leonard King. Mark's brow furrowed. Is there a problem? Keanu shook his head. Quite the opposite. I want to make sure Leonard gets the support he deserves. And I'd like your help to make it happen. Mark blinked, his confusion growing. I'm not sure what you mean. Keanu pulled out a check and placed it on the desk. The amount was significant enough to cover Leonard's salary for several months. This should cover his pay while he takes some much-needed time off. I'd also like you to make it seem like a bonus or a reward for his hard work. He can't know it's from me. Mark stared at the check, then back at Keanu. This is generous. But I'm not sure he'll accept it. Leonard's a proud man. That's why we'll frame it as coming from the company, Keanu replied. And one more thing, I've arranged for Grace's medications to be covered for the next 6 months through the local pharmacy. I'll send you the details. Mark hesitated, then nodded. All right. I'll handle it. Keanu gave a satisfied nod. Thank you. I appreciate your cooperation. A surprise gift. Later that afternoon, Leonard was called into the manager's office. Nervously adjusting his vest, he stepped inside, unsure of what to expect. Mark handed him an envelope with a faint smile. What's this? Leonard asked, eyeing the envelope suspiciously. It's a bonus, Mark explained. For your hard work and dedication. You deserve it. Leonard opened the envelope slowly, his hands trembling. Inside was a check large enough to cover his overdue bills and more. His breath caught in his throat as he stared at the amount. I don't understand, Leonard said, his voice barely above a whisper. Let's just say it's the company's way of saying thank you, Mark replied, his tone unusually kind. Leonard left the office in a daze, the envelope clutched tightly in his hand. When he arrived home, he found Grace sitting in her usual spot by the window, holding their wedding photo. He knelt beside her, tears welling in his eyes. Grace, he said softly, showing her the check. Someone's looking out for us. We have a chance now, a real chance. For a fleeting moment, Grace's eyes seemed to brighten. She reached out to touch Leonard's face, her fingers light as a feather. You've always looked out for me, she murmured, her voice clear for the first time in weeks. Leonard froze, his heart racing. Grace. I remember, she whispered, her gaze locking with his. Our wedding. The song we danced to. Leonard's tears flowed freely as he held her close. I never stopped loving you, he said, his voice breaking. Not for a second. Keanu's perspective. As Leonard and Grace shared their quiet miracle, Keanu sat on his motorcycle in the distance, watching the small house bathed in the glow of the setting sun. He adjusted his helmet and revved the engine, a sense of fulfillment washing over him. Kindness, he thought, doesn't always need recognition, it just needs to exist. With that, he sped away, ready to face whatever the road ahead would bring, knowing he had made a difference in 2 lives that day. The following days passed like a dream for Leonard. The burden he had carried for so long felt lighter, and the tension in his shoulders began to ease. Grace, though still bound by her illness, had moments of clarity that Leonard treasured like rare jewels. They spent more time together, laughing softly at old memories, sharing quiet cups of tea, and even dancing slowly to the tune of their wedding song in the living room. For Leonard, these fleeting moments were worth more than any treasure. A curious encounter. One day, Leonard received a call from the pharmacy where he usually picked up Grace's medications. Mr. King, the pharmacist said cheerfully, we just wanted to let you know that all of your wife's prescriptions have been covered for the next 6 months. You don't owe a thing. Leonard's heart skipped a beat. What? Are you sure? Positive, the pharmacist replied. It seems someone wanted to ensure you had one less thing to worry about. Hanging up the phone, Leonard sat in stunned silence. His thoughts drifted back to the stranger in the parking lot, the man who had helped him with the carts and listened to his story with such compassion. A faint suspicion crept into his mind, but he shook his head. No, it couldn't be. Keanu's quiet return. Meanwhile, Keanu was busy wrapping up his commitments in the area. Despite the satisfaction he felt about helping Leonard, his work often called him to new places and new stories. But something about Leonard and Grace lingered in his mind, a reminder of the resilience and love that could endure life's hardest trials. One afternoon, he found himself near the supermarket again. Unable to resist, he parked his motorcycle in a far corner of the lot and watched from a distance. Leonard was there, moving the carts with the same careful diligence, but this time, his steps seemed lighter. Keanu smiled to himself, satisfied that the older man was finding moments of peace. As Keanu turned to leave, he noticed a young employee, a cashier, glancing at him curiously. The boy hesitated before approaching. Excuse me, he said nervously, are you Keanu Reeves? Keanu smiled warmly. Yes, I am. The boy's face lit up. Wow, I can't believe it. My dad's a huge fan. Could I, get a picture? Of course, Keanu replied, crouching slightly so the boy could snap a selfie. As they chatted briefly, the boy mentioned Leonard. He's the nicest guy here, always helping out everyone. It's cool you're friends with him. Keanu's smile widened. He's a remarkable man. A legacy of kindness. Back at home, Leonard discovered a small package on his doorstep. Inside was a simple card with a note written in elegant handwriting. Dear Leonard. I hope this small gesture lightens your load and gives you more time with the people who matter most. The world needs more hearts like yours. Never forget, you are not alone. A friend. Leonard turned the card over in his hands, tears brimming in his eyes. Though the note was unsigned, his heart told him who had sent it. That evening, Leonard sat on the porch with Grace, holding her hand as they watched the sun set. For the first time in years, he felt not just relief but a spark of hope. Whoever you are, he murmured into the evening breeze, thank you. You've given us so much more than just help, you've given us time and peace. The road ahead. Keanu rode away from Willow Creek, the wind rushing past his face as the sun dipped below the horizon. He didn't need accolades or acknowledgement. What mattered to him was knowing he had made a difference, even if only in one small corner of the world. He believed that kindness had a ripple effect, that the smallest act could inspire others to spread goodness in their own way. And in Willow Creek, it did. Leonard, buoyed by the support he'd received, began quietly paying it forward. He covered a coworker's shift when their child was sick, left anonymous notes of encouragement for struggling employees, and even donated a portion of his unexpected windfall to a local charity. The kindness Keanu had sown had taken root, spreading far beyond what he could have imagined. Epilogue. Years later, Leonard sat on the same porch, now weathered with age, holding Grace's hand as they watched their grandchildren play in the yard. Though Grace's illness had eventually taken her, Leonard carried the memory of their last precious days together in his heart. On the mantel inside the house sat a small framed photo, a snapshot of Leonard and Grace on their wedding day. Beside it was a folded note, carefully preserved, a testament to the day a stranger changed their lives forever. And somewhere on a winding road, Keanu Reeves continued his quiet journey, knowing that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the deepest marks on the hearts they touch.